So hi everyone, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to this RDA TIGER informational webinar. I'm Alex Alipalta. I am the RDA Association Communication and Engagement Officer, and I will very briefly introduce you to the concept, why we're all here today. I will very briefly introduce you to our tigers, our speakers for today. If I can have the next slide, Louise, please. Thank you. So today you will hear from a number of our tigers representing the various partners within the project and the different activities and services that we offer. Most of us will keep it very brief, as our focus of the day is the facilitation service, the application process, and getting your questions and providing as much information as we can around the new open call for facilitation. Can I have the next slide, please, Louise? Thanks. Some very quick housekeeping before we kick off. So this webinar is being recorded. The recording is going to be published on the RDA YouTube channel and the RDA website, and hopefully we hope it will be a resource for those hoping to apply to this call and future calls. It's a webinar format, so you will hear from all our tigers, all our speakers. If you do have any questions, please put them into the chat, and there is a Q&A section at the very end of this webinar, and we will address all of your queries then. If you have more questions after the end of the webinar, please contact us, please reach out. We are at rdatigerinfo@rdalliance.org. So you can reach out anytime. We would love to hear from you. Next slide, please. Thank you. So these are our tigers. Very quickly. Next slide, please. And next again, thanks. So first you will hear from Najla Redberg, who is our project manager here at the European RDA offices and in RDA TIGER. Najla will give you an overview of the project and all the services. Next, please. You will also hear from Carlos Martinez Ortiz, representing the Netherlands eScience Center, who will speak to the software focus of RDA TIGER. Next, please. And next up, there will be, thanks. Next up, there will be Laura Molloy from CoData, who's the senior research lead over at CoData. She will talk about the landscape and engagement activities within TIGER. Next up will be Wim Hugo, the Chief Technology Officer at DANS, who will give an overview of the maintenance facility and all the activities within that work package and that service. Next up, our very own director at the European offices, Ari Azmi, who will speak to you about the facilitation service, the application process, and all the good stuff about the facilitation. You will also hear from me again in a couple of minutes, and I will take you through the communications support that we can offer to the RDA working groups. So with that, I will stop talking and I will pass on the floor to Najla, who will give you the overview of the project. Thank you.
Okay, hello everybody. Thank you very much, Alex. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so that was a great run through of all the people involved, and just to say that RDA, as you know, has been around for 10 years. We've had a successful 10 years, which we celebrated. We're celebrating all year, and we celebrated last month in Gothenburg. We are part of the European arm, so to speak, of the Research Data Alliance, and our new association that's almost 2 years old. And this is one of the first European funded projects that we're managing and rolling out. And we're no better place to start than supporting the very good work that RDA has done to date. And we certainly realized and have realized over the years that there's definitely a need for more help on the ground in terms of rolling out the working groups. We rely heavily on the volunteer community, which works. It's a great model, but we recognize that there needs to be more services provided to you who are working on, doing hard work to support you, get the working group up and running, manage it over its life cycle, and then bring it to its fruition with the output. So that was the rationale, really, was to really lower the barriers and streamline the processes for, say, writing a case statement, for reaching out to the right people involved to help find co-chairs to populate the group, and to make the work efficient and obviously more visible through the right communications both ways. and then examine, where the status of the output is, how can we bring it the last mile and publish it or get the right consultation on board, and to make it impactful. And ultimately with the aim that, our working groups really the right tool, and they are, to make open science work, because it's bottom up and it's community led in terms of the themes, but can we add this extra service layer to make these working groups a successful model to making open science work globally and within Europe. So as I said, we are funded through the European Open Science Cloud. We need to keep that in mind in some of the themes that we're going to give support to, and we're going to be working with some of the working groups in the European Open Science Cloud, but also RDA can make that vital connection to all the other global open science and data sharing solutions that are out there. So that's the rationale behind the project. It's a great project. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so as part of the project, we are going to be offering support, different kinds of support to the working groups at different stages of the life cycle. Now, today, the purpose of this webinar is to focus on the first open call that we have, which is in orange, which is to support the working groups. So I'm not going to go into the other three boxes, but just to say that we are very much at the beginning stages of the project. We will have other open calls, and they will have a financial dimension, and they'll be slightly different to this one. This open call that we're looking at today is to provide working groups with in-kind human support, so to speak, from beginning to end. So you can apply, and then we will identify 4 of the applications, 4 working groups that will get a range of support throughout its life cycle. So the 4 bullet points: to facilitate, to communicate, to help with the output, and to also inject this landscape analysis and information throughout its life cycle. So watch this space in the next year or so for upcoming grants. This call itself is permanently open. We will say at the end how you can apply, but there will be cut-off dates every year where we have a selection of the groups. So there will be a number of groups funded in this round, which ends in May. We'll give the exact dates. I think we'll identify 4 RDA working groups, and then you can be assigned a facilitator, and you will get these services over its life cycle. Can I have the next slide, please? So just to stress that we are not, as a team, going to do the work of the RDA group, which may be a good thing and a bad thing, because we're not going to take the role of actually rolling out and delivering the data challenge that you are working on. Rather, there's definitely been a recognition that someone should accompany the group throughout its life cycle. So we will facilitate and not lead, and that's really as simple as that. We will pinpoint the areas that need to be worked on to get a case statement in. We will facilitate bringing and populating the groups. We will facilitate helping to identify co-chairs, but we will not be the co-chair, and we will not do the work. We will smooth line the process. So it won't be too top down at all, but it will be somebody to monitor and to be there in the background who you could consult, to point you to potential grants, and to point you to the wider open science landscape, which is another aspect that we're working on to make the connection. So it's very much a facilitation role here, and not someone who's going to jump in and do the work. I'm afraid the work will have to be done by the working group, and so nothing will change on that front. But it'll be an accompanying process throughout the 1.5 years of the group. Can I have the next slide? So these are the services. So we see this in terms of a service provision. 4 areas that we're going to build up over the course of this project. The first is facilitation, which we're looking at today. So really from the first beginning of the idea that you may have, I have this idea for a working group, can this fly? We can give you consultation on that. It has to go through the technical advisory board. It has to be, signed off by the RDA governance, so to speak, and all these different things, running the meetings. We can help with all that. And then I've spelt that all out in terms of what facilitation means. Communications is also incredibly important. As we know, a lot of people are not sometimes not aware of the great things that come out of RDA and the solutions. So we will add that extra layer of communicating the process as it goes along. Where applicable, we will add an extra layer of communication to the work plan, to the case statement and to the work plan of the group. Output services, the third services, is really examining the state of play in terms of what you're planning to produce and helping work towards the last mile. Does it need a consultation? Does it need to be edited? Does it need a glossy report, and so on? And also output in the sense that they need to be around forever. They need to be made fair, visible. We need to put them somewhere. They need to be published, and they need to have the right metadata attached. And you'll hear about all these elements in a bit. Landscape and engagement, of course, we're not in a bubble, and we're certainly not in a European bubble. We're an international open science movement. All of us believe in it, and we need to make the right connections to what is happening on the ground in other areas of the world, including what's happening in RDA, because RDA is complex and many, many things are happening. As we know from the plenaries, we're overwhelmed with the amount of work that's happening. So we're going to map all of those in this landscaping and engagement service. So those are the 4 areas we're going to develop. By the end of the project, we'll have them slick and rolled out. Can I have the next slide, please? Just to say that we'll also be monitoring the service quality as part of the project. We have some pilots that are already starting midway through the life cycle of the working group that were at the beginning, at the end. So as we run these pilots parallel to this, we will get feedback and improve the services and the quality. And we'll be working with the working groups to co-design that. And we also have a selection committee, a selection board that's sort of independent of us as a project, that will meet to look at the applications for the grants that we run and decide which working groups are eligible to get in-kind support and different kinds of support. Can I have the next slide? So yes, as it doesn't need to be stressed that open science is international, and of course we will make this connection throughout there. But the ultimate aim is leading towards solutions for open science, and we really want to kind of synthesize that and make sure we're not duplicating, and to communicate it properly so that we get the real impact that the groups deserve. As we are, we're funded as part of the partnership in European Open Science Cloud, we will also be connecting closely with the task forces and other projects funded in Europe, and also many of the developments in the technical developments in EOSC and the research infrastructures as well. And importantly, what's happening in different regions and developments in Europe at national level in terms of data sharing solutions, and the regional disciplinary developments, of course, with all the cluster projects and cross-disciplinary work. So we'll be synthesizing all of these and working closely with all these different elements of the whole complex. It is a complex landscape, we all appreciate that, and we're here to make those links, including to the global community. Yeah, so we want to bubble up the work of RDA and make sure it's international, but it's also a lot of it's coming from Europe. I think that's what I have to say for the, there's one more slide, which is a very colourful slide. Yes, so this is how we're organising ourselves internally in the project. You don't need to look too closely at this, but just to give an element that there's an outward-facing set of services we will provide to you as a community and grants, but internally we have a lot going on behind the scenes in terms of developing all the different mechanisms, and we want to really kind of make sure all the workflows fit together and they're systematized, and that we're building up a good body of knowledge of what it is to run these working groups and all the different elements that we see as essential in all the different color categories, to making sure we have a holistic way of getting the good outputs from RDA and connecting it to the right landscape and communications and partner engagement. So a lot of these different high-level colors, communications, landscape, output, facilitation, you will hear from us today about, and it's going to be an exciting project. So we're happy to have this first webinar to promote this call. And we're going to be working hard in these different areas. And by the end, we will have a very good idea of how to run a successful RDA working group to the end, and what support you need as a community to get there. We'll be building up this knowledge. and supporting these outputs as well. Okay, thank you. So that's, I think, what I have to say to introduce the project. Over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Najla.
Thank you.
So, very quickly, as Najla mentioned, there will be a conversation about whether an additional layer of communication support is needed for the working groups. So if a group has applied and is selected to receive RDA TIGER support, upon consultation with the co-chairs and potentially the entire membership, we will work with the group to create a bespoke service, essentially. So it will be tailored to the working group needs depending on the stage that it is. So for example, if you're just kicking off, then we will work with you to create a strategy and a plan to reach the right membership, to find the appropriate channels, to get your idea for this group out there in the world. If you are in the main working period of your group, we will support you with, for example, disseminating any plenary sessions you're organizing, any other activities that you're doing during this period. We will work with you to find your stakeholders within and out with RDA and to create your strategy and your plan. And as you're reaching the end of your working group in coordination with the facilitation service, we will work with you to find, for example, if you need our support, we will help you reach your potential adopters. We will help you promote your recommendations and your outputs. And again, we will build a bespoke tailored plan about how to go about doing this and how we can help you. Various things we can do for you: newsletters within and out with RDA, direct outreach to people that you tell us are important to you, or we work together to find who is important. Event support, social media, website management support, as I said, bespoke service upon consultation with the co-chairs and the working group. There are a few pre-selected pilot groups that we are at the moment working with to provide this communication service. And as Najla said, there will be reviews and there will be refining of these services down the line. So I think that's for me. I don't want to take up much more of this webinar's time. On to Laura, I believe. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Hello, yes, my name is Laura Malloy. I'm the Senior Research Lead here at CODATA. This is the Committee on Data of the International Science Council here in Paris, and I'm very happy to be with you today. We are leading Work Package 3, Landscape and Engagement. This work package includes two major activities. Firstly, there's the Landscape Awareness Service, and secondly, the Funders Forum. The main thing I'm talking about today is the Landscape Monitoring and Engagement Service. This is an optional service, and so even if you're applying for other parts of Facilitation Service, this isn't something that you necessarily need to use, but it is here for you as a value add. And the point of this is, of course, to help those planning an RDA working group to know what, if anything, is already happening in their areas of focus, to help you avoid reduplicative effort, and where relevant, to help you foster helpful new contacts across the space. The service includes both European and, as Najla mentioned, broader international communication and research activities. And we will work with you to map the global major relevant initiatives related to open science, fair data, software development and research evaluation, whatever it is that you're working on. There'll be a tailored service further to the ones that Alex discussed in communications to help you find the area of the landscape and investigate the area of the landscape that you're interested in. This activity will heavily use the existing networks of the Research Data Alliance, as Najla mentioned, also the other partners, so CODATA, Research Software Alliance, the Science Centre, and DANCE, already have projects, initiatives, contacts that are part of this landscape, and we will do our best to find the spots of those that are useful for you. And so the whole effort is supported by existing connectivity to these major European and global initiatives and networks. And the activities would include desk research in relation to your needs and, if relevant, active connection to these existing networks at the beginning of the working group process, but also later on we can also provide updates through ongoing monitoring during the life of your working group. So I hope this seems like a very useful optional offer for those setting up a working group. The second part of Work Package 3, this work package, is there is some activity in this work package for the RDA Funders Forum. And this was initiated around 2013, and it's a group of funding organisations with an interest in research data and data policy. And it provides the International Funders Forum for funder to funder and funder to RDA discussions and information exchange. So there's a little bit of modest support action for these meetings in terms of facilitation as well as dissemination and communication activities to encourage new funding bodies to participate. And I think this is an important part of what RDA does, and is an important part of what Nigel touched on, the idea that it's really important that we make sure the hard work that goes into working groups produces really useful deliverables and outputs that are respond to the challenges that funders have at the moment, and science in general is looking to answer. So unless Ari would like to add anything further on the Funders Forum activity, I'll wrap up there, but just to say, get in touch, please, if you have questions after today's webinar. I'd be very happy to talk this work package over with you. Thank you very much.
I have nothing special to add, so let's move to the next one, please.
Yes, thanks. So I'm Wim Hugo from DANS, and we are looking after the work package that provides output support. And the broad idea there is that RDA is currently establishing what is called a maintenance facility. In essence, tools and infrastructure to ensure that the outputs from working groups and interest groups and other activity in RDA, to the extent that it is needed, can be published properly, properly preserved in cases where this is necessary, and then also to make it possible to leverage all the effort that goes into creating other materials, web references, resources, and so on, to the maximum possible extent. So in very broad terms, the maintenance facility is essentially somewhat of a metadata publishing platform, together with the ability to preserve the linked outputs for the long term. But it goes further than that, because behind the scenes, it links to graph-based data. So it makes it possible to even annotate or link outputs, resources, web materials, anything that you're really touching as a working group, to linked open data references that embeds it into the landscape, as it were. So there's a formal part of it that is equivalent to just publishing some output with the requisite metadata, but behind the scenes, we're building up vocabularies and graph data that reflects RDA's interests and perspectives and themes that they are interested in, and also extracting additional information from the landscape analysis that Laura just talked about, and making it much more useful for the future. So for these working groups that are selected by RDA for support, this particular work package would then assist those working groups with designing and preparing their outputs for such publication, together with a way of structuring and maybe annotating and linking other materials and resources and references that they generate during the lifetime of the working group. Provide them with support staff and ticket systems to help them with these processes. And then, of course, rely on their feedback to refine the system. So in essence, these selected working groups are also very useful to the work package as a source of almost beta testing of the system. So that we can improve it for other users outside of the project. So that's in very broad terms what we are aiming to support you with. The slides that follow we are going to skip, but they have a sort of a high-level drawing of the bits and pieces that make up the maintenance facility, in case you're interested, and then 2 screenshots from the design mock-ups that we've been creating to indicate how these kinds of services and resources may be embedded into the RDA website. So I think that's it from me for the moment.
Okay, and I will talk next about the kind of the core service what we are providing for the working groups, at least in this call. And it's about the facilitation service. And really the idea of facilitation service, as Nigel already kind of gave you a little bit of highlight here, It is the group's kind of connection to the RDA TIGER, and it lets the group, especially the chairs who usually have this far had a kind of lot of additional tasks, to concentrate on being experts, and the facilitator is there to help them in their activities. It's not intending that we will kind of run all the practical issues of the group per se, but it is a helping hand in the working group's work. And partly also to make sure that the working group is working efficiently, and also that it takes a part it takes timely actions, and things what have been agreed on are being done, or at least reminding people on these aspects. The main services are in the beginning of working group life, before even they have kind of been officially approved. The facilitator will help the group with the work plan, and also trying to find these other services, many of them which were already described, like communication and landscape and so on, and making sure that the group gets the best benefit of these services if they need them. They of course help with a lot of meetings, because a lot of RDA groups, the activity is really about meetings and communicating with each other. And the facilitator can also help the group with applying these other support services which were mentioned earlier, which is not part of this call, but in part of future calls what the groups can then apply for. The facilitator can also help in some sense with the outputs, in a sense that they can provide some of these last mile support actions, either directly by themselves or then by using these other support mechanisms. For example, helping the group to finalize their output, in a consistent way. And hopefully also the facilitator can also bring some other kind of helping group work with different kind of tools and ideas, and how to make the groups work more efficiently, and also keeping up the momentum of the group work. And so the overall idea here is that the facilitator is the connection to the RDA TIGER, and as well they will also lower the workload of the co-chairs in all kind of additional tasks, additional work what is usually related with running an RDA working group. Please, next slide, please. So for these ones, and actually these services, and before I go to the call itself, is that we will always agree with the group how the facilitator and other services are provided, and what is kind of the expected workload, what is the goal of the group, of course, is needed. So after that one, we can decide how much facilitator hours are needed, and how much communication actions are needed, and do we need a landscape analysis or not. There's also this agreement of the role of the facilitator, and I think especially for facilitator, this is important, that agreeing with the group co-chairs, what is the role, what is expected the facilitator to do. And Najela mentioned many of these aspects, so I will not go in there too much in the details of what is included in this role. But I think that the key part there is that facilitator, at least in my mind, can be kind of a contributing factor in the group, but definitely cannot lead the strategic action. I think it's very important that we are not getting an idea that if you are an RDA TIGER group, there is the facilitator who decides what is done. This is not the case. And then, of course, as I mentioned, they can also help with the other support mechanisms and trying to connect to these support help. And these contracts will be made in writing, and then kind of the expectation we also kind of want to control the expectations of the group, and also the expectation of the facilitator also on what kind of feedback they can get from the group. So this is always a group by group decision. So please, next slide, please. Then Carlos, please, special notice for some of these groups, what we are wanting to support.
Yeah, thanks, Ari. So of course, the RDA TIGER support is meant for RDA working groups, and data is intrinsically linked always to software. So for groups that have a software component, we also want to encourage these groups to participate. So the eScience Center and more broadly the Research Software Alliance is involved in this project to provide the support for working groups that have a software aspect to them. And what does a software aspect mean? So this means works that are somehow looking at the process of developing and maintaining research software. One group that I would use as an example, because it was historically one of the groups that that did this, was the Fair for Research Software Working Group, which was a joint group between RDA and RISA and Force 11. But okay, so groups that involve this process of maintaining software, groups that would include that affect the people who maintain research software, so research software engineers. Groups that are relevant to research software engineer would be very welcome to apply for support, and groups that support the infrastructures required for research software, or groups that relate to the policies related to research software. So these are some of the aspects that we could think of that could touch on the software aspect of working groups. And these groups will be facilitated by the eScience Center, so by either by me directly or one of my colleagues. And if you're not sure if your particular working group has an aspect that you consider it to be software specific or not, then of course, please feel free to reach out to us and we can talk about whether this has software focus or not. And that's it.
Thank you, Carlos. And so next we go to the application thing, and we can of course go more in detail here in questions. So in principle, we have this website where you can start the application. It's part of the RDA website, and I hope if you could, Alex, put the link to that one also in the chat so people can find it easier. There is a Word document which you need to download and fill, and then the review is done based on this one. As I mentioned, we can only support at this phase a couple of groups. In actually 4 is planned for this first call, and so if you're not being supported immediately, it doesn't mean that you cannot start your working group. It just means that we will hopefully start in the next call. We can support more, and maybe we can assign facilitator and other services for you at that stage. The reason for this one really is that we have, of course, we need to start with a smaller number of groups and assign, develop the services accordingly. So there's also a little bit of aspect of being a guinea pig here if you apply in the first call. So please go to the next slide. And we will evaluate the applications. And this comes actually from the proposal and also part of the kind of where our funding comes from. And so for the working groups to be supported by RDA TIGER, they must have an international dimension. And international here means out of Europe as well. They should have some connection to Europe, but also additionally connection to other parts of the world as well. And they should also have the theme somehow connectable to the RDA strategy or connection to the EOSC, or optionally research evaluation and monitoring, or in some cases, a much more wider sense, open science themes which are relevant for RDA and very timely at the moment. These sound very strange probably, but these are kind of the issues which come from the proposal and the funder priorities at the time when this was applied. In general, you don't need to have connection to all of these, but of course, if you have these connections, it always helps in this evaluation. And as I mentioned, we are supporting now 4 working groups, at least that's planned. Of course, depending on the need, how much support needs they need in this application, and afterwards we can even think of extending this depending on our resources. Please go to the next slide. So in practice, what is kind of expected here in the guidance in the website, you will see there that there are these requests of how do you connect to EOSC and open science, and also then short descriptions of what kind of impact your group is expected to have and how you are going to implement this. I don't think that you have to go in a horrible amount of detail here. It's more important to get an idea that is your group responding to this group and these aspects, and then we can prioritize at this moment which working groups we are supporting. This does not in any way mean that and I want to make it very clear that if you are not selected in the first stage, it does not mean that we don't think that your group is important and should not become an RDA working group, or if it is already that we think it's somehow not as important. We just have to prioritize this somehow, and this is done with this process, and we are hoping to make it as transparent as possible for anybody applying. Please, next slide. Overall, we are looking at excellence on the open science and impact. They are both 1/4 of the points, and implementation is about 50%, and that also includes the international connectivity. Next slide, please. So the call is open all the time, so you can at any moment send us your application, but in reality, there are these cutoff dates after we collect what we have at that moment. And then we do this evaluation by this selection board, and they select which groups are facilitated and not. And this year we will have still free cutoff points, and the next one is on the 31st of May. So there's 1 month time for that one, and we will give the results within 1 month of the call closing. Oh, well, the call is open all the time. That's a little bit unfortunate writing there. The call is open all the time, but after this cutoff, 1 month after that cutoff date, we will get the results to the groups. So then we go to questions and answers, if any from the audience or anybody else. Angela, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Ari. So it's over to you. So we have 4 weeks until the first cutoff date and this selection committee. We should also say that we have this selection committee to make it a transparent process, because we just simply don't know how many applications we're going to get. So we will have criteria to evaluate all the proposals in a fair manner according to the rubric that Ari also, set out. The following things should be included in the application. So does anyone have any questions? I see one in the chat, which I can address now, but we'd also be, open to any feedback afterwards on how we ran the session. If there's anything missing that we could do better. It has been recorded, so for those who are watching this afterwards, you can also send your feedback afterwards. So I'll go to the first question, which is from Sarah. Is this call aimed at established working groups, or can someone apply to start one? So it's the latter. It's certainly for any group of people who perhaps held a birds of a feather, for example, would be a good case study, or somebody who's had an idea, discussed it with a couple of international or European players around a challenge. It is open to people who would like to get moving on a working group. So you do not have to be, because I added this to the slides, but we didn't show it at the end, I'm sorry. You do not have to be an established group, and you do not have to have endorsed by the technical advisory board, if that makes sense. So you can apply, and if you get through the criteria and you're successful, we could then help you write the case statement and get you through the technical advisory board. We can't guarantee that it will be endorsed and it will be successful, but we can certainly facilitate that process. Is that clear? You could write in the chat, or you could speak out, whatever. Sorry.
I could add on that one that existing working groups can apply for facilitator, but of course, the longer they are already in their work, it might be less useful for the groups. But it's not the prerequisite that you are not already existing working group. So it's also is not the limitation to the other direction.
And existing working groups may find the other calls that we run in the future of use as well, because there may be some small grants to apply to enhance the activities of their existing groups. Okay, so a specific sentence, the applicant should be nominated. Yes, so ideally the person putting themselves forward should be someone who has discussed being a co-chair or not, you know, or part of the group. So we would expect the person initiating it to play, I suppose, more of a leading role. But if it then decided that they're not going to be a chair or co-chair, that's also fine.
Yeah, to clarify that one, I think that the key point here is that if you're applying for your group, you should have some sort of idea that also the other group members are aware that you are applying for this, and also that you have some sort of position, so we don't end up in a situation that suddenly we are deciding to support your group and then everybody else is like, what? No, we haven't agreed on this. So I think it's just that the applicant has some sort of idea that the group actually does want this support.
Community backing, maybe.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's good feedback. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions or? No, we don't need to use all the time we have. Would any of the Tiger team like to ask a question or raise anything? We've put aside until the hour, but that doesn't matter if we end early.
But anyhow, so I do hope that you apply. If you have any problems with the application procedure, just connect to us. It seems a bit bureaucratic as you can see that the form, but don't worry about it. It just indicates that we, as Nigella said, we don't know yet how many applicants we got. So we had to be very transparent on this application procedure, and that way you won't need to ask a little bit more information probably than you actually will need in the end.
Maybe I could say one thing, Naja, if I want to say that this webinar has been very helpful, and also want to say that the Tiger project looks really interesting, and for somebody who co-chairs one of the smaller working groups, I think we could really use this kind of support. So I just want to thank you for the webinar, for putting all this work together. It's done really nicely, and I think it's going to be a great support for RDA generally, to have this kind of background there and so forth. So thank you for this.
Thanks, Francis. Thank you. Good to hear that. We hope it's going to be a success and we'll really support all of you who are working hard. We know that. And thank you to Alex who put this together. So do, email us offline if we've missed something or any feedback on this session. We'll be running more, of course. This is particularly for the facilitation call, but the call will be open there. We do have these cutoff dates, so if you can always reapply as well. I think Ari already said that as your working group. So good luck. I don't know if anyone's thinking of applying or would like to indicate they want to apply, but of course you could discuss that with us as well offline. And we hope to see some good applications in 4 weeks' time, just under. Anything else, Alex, Ari, any of the other Tigers?
Maybe just to say, if any questions do come up, please email us at the RDA Tiger info address. I put it in the chat. So if you leave this webinar and you think, oh no, I forgot to ask my question, you can always reach us.
Well, enjoy the extra 15 minutes of your day for free.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you, Laura.